Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Consciousness Review. I'm Miriam Knight, and our guest today is author David Patten. To be able to say that is amazing because David is functionally illiterate. He was born with severe cognitive challenges at a time when dyslexia and autism were little understood. His parents were well educated and caring, but he was repeatedly misdiagnosed and left school unable to read or write. He made a living dealing drugs, but David came to realize that his limitations did not have to define who he was. He discovered he had a genius for abstract mathematics, and that eventually led to a successful career debugging computer systems. Unlike many autistic children, David had a deep sensitivity and insight into people that allowed him to have meaningful and affectionate human relationships. Today, he is the father of 2 grown, productive, and happy children, and he and his wife of 30 years, a physician, live in Hawaii. With the aid of specialized technology, David has written the story of his life. Dummy, a memoir, was so moving I literally couldn't put it down. So David Patten, welcome. I am really honored to have you with us. David, your life was really colored by this birth defect that you had called autistic spectrum disorder. Can you tell us, how did that affect you? How did that change your life?
Yeah, I had tremendous difficulties with at birth and childhood first. It affected me in different ways at different ages, and from birth, I was very colicky and sick, so that and I learned to talk. I didn't learn to talk till I was about 4, which is typical of autistic spectrum. I seemed to live in my own world. Didn't seem interested in other people or being aware of other people. And that extended into school, into not being able to read, struggling with understanding social situations, and being able to adapt to new situations. Mm-hmm. As I got older, the not being able to read kind of came forefront, and not being able to code and decode, reading between the lines in social situations, the rules of the road sort of, and decoding meaning from people that maybe weren't being direct. I tended to be very literal. The biggest effect in terms of my own personal feeling of it, my own personal experience of it, really had to do with my inability to keep up with other kids in school, and in my home life. In terms of that, it was just sort of a awareness that I probably wasn't going to have a career or a family in the same way that most would.
It was interesting that this kind of future vision of never being able to have a family was terribly important to you, even from early childhood.
Well, and I think this is a difficult thing for me to explain to even professionals that very well understand autism spectrum. And I think that I connected because the way my mother raised me, and maintained a connection to me from a very young age, just by holding me 20 hours a day as I was colicky. I was on adult doses of barbiturates, and she was up 20 hours a day holding me and maybe putting me down 2 to 4 hours at night and getting some sleep herself. I think through those years, just maintaining that kind of connection with me and holding my gaze, making sure I didn't withdraw into myself, gave me access to sort of, I'm finding a word here, biological or sort of physical connection to someone, made that my priority experience of the world, and I tried to experience the world through that, which is a very, very different experience. I believe autism is much, or at least from my experience, is really about overwhelm and shutting down from overwhelm and the experiences that overwhelm you. I think there's many causes for autism, but symptomatically, much of it's trying kind of a self-preservation, shutting down and staying in your own world to try and maintain a sort of compartmentalizing experience and sensory experience, particularly to protect the overwhelm. And I think that through my mother's connection there, I was able to stay connected in a human way, in the way most autistic, particularly just any overwhelmed person at that young age would have difficulty doing.
Yes,
to a world that that I think many others wouldn't have had.
I would say that your mother's early attentions to you were quite heroic, and she was a psychologist, wasn't she?
Yeah, a child psychologist, in fact, and I think I was fortunate for that reason. She also got a psychiatrist involved in second grade when it became obvious I was going to flunk, and I suspect he told her that I had to be strictly honest with me. She had to be strictly honest with me about everything and the consequences of everything if he was going to work with her, with me. And that's when she told me that I would be institutionalized if, when I pressured her to find out when I was flunking, what is going to happen to me? I can't read. Am I going to have a family? Am I ever going to have kids? That connection to family was important to me. And imagining the future, I couldn't imagine it without that. So when she told me that I may have to be, she wasn't about to, she felt that her job as a parent primarily was to raise independent children. And so after 18, I was on my own, and she made that clear to me at that time, that if I wasn't capable of all of that, that I'd probably have to be institutionalized. And that sort of sent me in another direction.
Yeah. Two thoughts come to mind. One is that there are a lot of children, there's a real rise in autism today, and there's a certain talk about highly sensitive children being born on the planet. And I'm wondering if autism isn't a reaction, a kind of a global reaction of these highly sensitive children to protect themselves from the bombardment of electronic waves, television, noise, etc.
I hope I can explain this clearly. I agree with you on this, and maybe just to be a little more nuanced with it, I believe a lot of what's going on is, you hear of in the past, or maybe in more primitive cultures, theoretically, or the way we call it, primitive cultures, kids often were held for the first few years of their lives universally in some cultures. And I think that as life becomes more complex and at younger and younger ages, we're brought into situations that can be overwhelming for kids, particularly if they start out hypersensitive. And I think that there's probably thousands of reasons, maybe as many reasons as there are kids for these sensitivities. It can be allergies. It can be just the way the kid was born, the way they're built. And with more and more of these external influences, the tendency towards overwhelm, particularly with the demands on kids at younger and younger ages, and the stimulation that goes on in a day. If you think of all of the things that happen to a person in a day, they're exposed to far more than they ever have been before, and that tendency into overwhelm, I think, is what, for me. I tried to control and separate my sensory experience, and that is symptomatically much of what caused me problems in my learning disabilities and everything else. And I think the more that we can maybe give kids a more connected and stay aware of the kids' tendency to overwhelm, and give them ways to deal with that at younger and younger, and even into older ages, the more we'll be able to adapt, because we're not going to be able to stop all the changes that are happening in the levels of stimulation that they're experiencing to some degree as they get older. But at younger ages, when we have that control, I think it would be important for us to be more attentive to that.